Welcome to the Big Honker Podcast. Did you know?
There she is.
Brought to you by Mallard Bay. And the first Family of Waterfowl Season 3 comes out on YouTube Thursday night at what time?
July.
It's a freaking dirt dauber. They can hurt you, Andy.
I've seen these things act very ferocious.
Yeah, they're real ferocious. What time's it come out?
Well, they're
Thursday?
they're on, you know, they're these GMO dirt daubers.
Yes.
Is he on me?
No, he's flying around over there.
7 o'clock.
7
o'clock Thursday night. I don't know when you're listening to this, so that is July 18th.
This week, this Thursday, coming out, July 18th.
What if they're listening to this in September?
Well, if they are, then they can go back and watch the YouTube channel, the Big Honker Podcast YouTube channel, the first Family of Waterfowl, Episode 3, Season 3, ins and outs of being at a hunting camp and lodge and whatever we do. With all the people we have, it's a pretty good series. Have a lot of different things on it. Look forward to y'all watching it and giving us some feedback, please. Also, still have some room left on the Boss Hunt, November 18th, 20 the Steel Reserve. All right, did you know? Do you want to hit the deal again? Did you know? Okay.
Did you know?
You want me to go first?
I can go first.
All right, go ahead.
So we are talking all about VPs, and we're going to get into the decision of Trump yesterday.
We'll do that on the World on Fire.
On the World on Fire, which is coming up right after we record this. So I took a deep dive into vice presidents.
Interested to hear this.
So, did you know that before... Let me see if I can find it. Anyway, we'll just go through this. Did you know what state has produced the most vice presidents?
I'm going to say Virginia because I think they're the most on presidents too. So I'm going to guess one of the Northeast colonies. I'm going to say Virginia.
It is New York State.
Okay.
It has produced 11. Now, in all fairness to the other states, 4 of the first 8 presidencies had a VP from New York.
That's why I knew it was going to be one of the early colonies.
It's kind of one of those things. It's an older colony. You know, a lot of business goes down. Do you know what second is?
I'm going to say Virginia.
Indiana.
That really shocks me because it's not
Indiana has had 6. So from the end of the Civil War to the beginning of World War I, you had to win New York and Indiana to secure the presidency. New York and Indiana were actually swing states.
I wonder why.
A long time ago.
I wonder why Indiana, the population was that much there?
Let me see.
That's just very interesting.
This was common practice used from the end of Civil War until World War I. New York and Indiana were considered the 2 key states that swung to either side of the bipartisan election. Most of the time, if presidential election is won in these 2 states, they will be elected president. Ballots containing this pairing in the past were extremely common. After World War I, this practice became much more uncommon until Donald Trump and Mike Pence redid it back then. As far as why, I can't tell you why.
That's interesting because Indianapolis is the only big city I can think of that's in Indiana.
Yeah. So, like I said, after World War I, that pairing until Trump Pence, I don't think you saw it at all.
An Indiana vice president,
New York, Indiana.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
So, do you know how many VPs went on to become president?
6. That's just a guess.
14.
No shit.
14. 8 because the president died in office, and 1 because the president resigned. The rest were reelected. So
5 has been reelected.
More than that.
You said the rest.
Okay. All 9 presidents have succeeded the presidency intra-term. They are Millard Fillmore, Andrew Johnson, Chester A. Arthur, Theodore Roosevelt, Calvin Coolidge, Harry Truman, Lyndon B. Johnson, and Gerald Ford. 4 vice presidents have been elected president: John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Martin Van Buren, and George H.W. Bush. Likewise, 2 former presidents have won the presidency: Richard Nixon and Joe Biden. So they weren't they weren't VP and then president in the next term, is what that means.
Richard Nixon.
There was a lag between.
Who was Richard Nixon a vice president for?
I'll have to look that up, Jeff. I don't know.
I did not. I did not know that Richard Nixon was ever a vice president.
Also, in recent decades, 3 incumbent vice presidents have lost in close elections: Nixon in 60, Hubert Humphrey in 68, and Al Gore in 2000. Additionally, former vice president Walter Mondale lost in 1984.
Yeah, he got his ass kicked.
So, let me see here. Do you know which state has produced the most presidents?
Virginia.
New York.
God dang it. One of these days,
7.
Virginia's going to be on top of something.
Do you know second? Second is Ohio. Third is Virginia.
Okay.
Ohio has produced 6. Virginia has produced 5. And if and when Donald Trump wins re-election in 2024, J.D. Vance will be the first vice president to hail from Ohio. There's also, let me see here. I had this earlier. I think 22 states out of 50 have had a vice president represent them, and only 19 of the 50 states have had a president come from them. Let me see here. What else do I have? These are 15 facts. I'll just skim through them. In 1972, the Presidential Succession Act passed, making the Senate president pro tempore, next in line after the vice president to succeed the president. The Constitution requires that the vice president of the United States be a native-born citizen, 35 years old. The United States has had 47 vice presidents versus only 44 presidents, because during Nixon's presidency, there were 3 different VPs, presidents that have come on. Until 1967, people just assumed that if the president died or was removed from office, the VP would assume the presidency. It was not until the 25th Amendment was passed that there was an official line of succession in case of a vice president absence. The Speaker of the House will assume the presidency. The vice president really only has one official duty, that is to break a tie in the Senate. But in recent years, the vice president has become like top advisor. VP and his family live in the Naval Observatory.
Which has got a tunnel that Joe Biden leaked out one time.
Per Section 3 of 25th Amendment, if the president is ill or under sedation, the vice president will assume his duties. Historically, vice presidents are chosen to balance some of the president's views by taking more moderate or radical positions on certain issues. You cannot be elected VP if you have ever rebelled against the United States.
Well, it's limited to Democrats.
Harry S. Truman was Roosevelt's VP, and FDR died just 3 months into his 4th term. Upon taking office, Truman was informed of the development of the atomic bomb, something which he had no clue was going on under the FDR administration. Truman created the National Security Council, in which most important matters of national security would be discussed in the vice president's presence. So
that's a very smart move.
He didn't want another guy to get...
yeah, it's a big slap in the face you don't know about.
Yeah, like what? We've got what?
Yeah.
Joe Biden is the first Catholic and first Delawarean to serve as vice president of the United States. Last fact, during a duel in 1801, Jefferson's Veep, Aaron Burr, was shot and killed Alexander Hamilton, who founded the New York Evening Post. So
that's interesting.
Those are some facts about the vice president.
I'm going to tell you how uninformed on history was. Richard Nixon was vice president for 8 years under Dwight Eisenhower. I did not know that.
I guess I didn't either.
He was a young guy, 39, kind of like DJ Vance. Okay. My did you know? My did you know is how many times do you think the United States was attacked during World War II on our own soil?
This feels like a trick question. I'm
Not a trick.
I'm going to say 8.
5.
Damn it. Alaska was some of it, wasn't it? The Aleutian
Well, they didn't
Islands?
have that on there, so I'm going to go with your 8's probably correct, because
Okay.
it's not on this list I've got. Anyways, the first time we were attacked was not really an attack, but it was it's called the Duquesne Spy Ring. The most sophisticated German espionage operation in the U.S. was established and busted before America even entered into World War II. The Duquesne spy ring included 30 men and 3 women operating under the director of Frederick Fritz Joubert Duquesne, a flamboyant South African adventurer and soldier who also spied for the Germans during World War I. Starting in the 30s, members of Duquesne's clandestine cell found their way into key civilian jobs in the U.S. Some operatives served as couriers by working aboard American merchant vessels and airlines, while others gathered information by posing as military contractors. In its first several months, the Duquesne spy ring gained significant intelligence on American shipping patterns and even stole military secrets regarding the bomb sites used in American aircraft. Despite its early success, the Duquesne spy ring was toppled in 1941 when a new recruit named William Siebold became a double agent for the U.S. In addition to funneling dummy radio messages to the Nazis, the Federal Bureau of Investigation provided Siebold with an office in New York outfitted with the hidden recording devices and a two-way mirror. Once Siebold had gathered enough evidence, the FBI arrested Duquesne and 32 of his operatives in the biggest espionage bust in American history just days after the bombing of World War II. They were convicted and sentenced to a total over 300 years in prison. The bombing of the Elwood oil field. After the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 41, a small contingent of Japanese submarines was dispatched east to patrol the California coastline. On February 23, 1942, the Japanese submarine 117 slinked into a channel near Elwood oil field, which is outside of Santa Barbara, California. After surfacing, the submarine lobbed 16 shells at Elwood Beach from its long deck gun before submerging and fleeing to the open ocean. The brief shelling only caused minor damage. A day later, reports of enemy aircraft led the so-called Battle of Los Angeles, in which American artillery was discharged over Los Angeles for several hours due to the mistaken belief that the Japanese were invading. Side note on this: there's a show called 1941 with John Belushi. Have you ever seen that?
No.
It's a funny show. It's a John Belushi deal. But anyways, he flies a Corsair, 41 Corsair. And it's based on this time there, and they think they're attacking Los Angeles, and they've got the guns. Anyways, it's a funny show. It didn't have a lot of claim or nothing, but it was one of his last movies. But anyways, I liked it. It's funny when I was a kid. The bombing of Fort Stevens and the Lookout air raids was the third one. On June 21st, 1942, on the Oregon coastline, after trailing American fishing vessels to bypass minefields, the Japanese submarine 125 made its way to the mouth of the Columbia River, right near Astoria. It surfaced near Fort Stevens, an antiquated army base that dated back to Civil War. Just before midnight, it used its 140-millimeter deck guns to fire 17 shells at the fort. Believing that the muzzle flashes of the fort's guns would only serve to reveal their position, the commander of Fort Stevens ordered his men not to return fire. The plan worked. They blew up a baseball field.
Oof.
Okay. Number 4 is Operation Pastorius. The largest invasion of American soil during World War II came in the form of 8 Nazi saboteurs sent to the United States on a doomed mission known as Operation Pastorius. The men, all naturalized American citizens who were living in Germany when the conflict began, were tasked with sabotaging the war effort and demoralizing the civilian population through acts of terrorism. In June of 1942, U-boats secretly dropped the 2 4-man crews off the coast of Armaganset, New York, which is going to be somewhere around Long Island. I'm guessing. I think that's where it's at. And Point Verdre Beach, Florida. Each team carried $84,000 in cash and enough explosives to wage a long campaign of sabotage. $84,000 in 1941. That was a lot of. That's,
couple million.
I'm gonna say probably close to million. People made $40 a week during World War II, so that was a weekly wage. And now the weekly wage is probably $1,000, so 25 times that, so $2 million probably.
What year was that? 44?
In 1942.
I can do the conversion.
Anyways, that was a lot of money, and it was all cash. But anyways, the men had orders to attack transport hubs, hydroelectric power plants, and industrial facilities. But before a single act of sabotage could ever take place, one of the guys, George Dasch, turned himself into the FBI. After 2 weeks, the FBI successfully rounded up the remaining saboteurs. 6 of the men were executed as spies, while Dasch and accomplice were jailed for 6 years before being deported by President Harry Truman. How much money was it?
1.5.
1.5. Japanese fire balloons called Fugos. Starting in 1944, the Japanese had come up with this plan where they had these balloons. They did 9,000 of them. They could send them up to 30,000 feet. They would get in the jet stream, and they would come over, and after 3 days, which was the time they figured to get over here, they would drop bombs on the United States. Nearly 350 of the bombs actually made it across the Pacific, and several were intercepted or shot down by the military. The only fatalities come from a single incident in Oregon where a pregnant woman and 5 children come across the thing. They picked it up and blew up and killed all of them.
Oof.
Now, me and Mom were in Brookings last year, Oregon. This February we were there. I-25 would later, the third one we talked about, would make history again when it executed the first ever bombing of the continental United States by an enemy aircraft in what became known as the Lookout Air Raids. I-25 returned to the Oregon coast in September 42 and launched a Yokosuka E-14Y float plane. They had these planes that they could fold up and they would sit them on the front of their submarines, and they could take off like an aircraft carrier with them. Really small little plane. It was a float plane. So I'm assuming they also could just take a winch and put it on the ocean. It would take off. But anyway, that's probably how they did it. And so they didn't take it off. They had another plane that they took off the deck, but this was a float plane. Dropped a pair of incendiary bombs in the hopes of starting a forest fire. This was in Brookings. Thanks to light winds and a quick response from fire patrol, the bombings failed to have its desired effect, as did a second bombing over Brookings later that month. The pilot of the Japanese float plane Nobuo Fujita would later make several goodwill visits to Brookings during the 60s and even proclaimed it an honorary citizen of the town in 1977. And I don't understand why Brookings was a place that the Japanese wanted, because it's a beautiful place, but I don't see any reason why it was there. But anyways, during World War II, the Japanese tried really, really hard. The Germans did the same thing on the East Coast. They sunk a couple of boats off the coast, one off the coast of Maine and one off the coast of Nantucket, that they didn't find till later. Right. The U.S. covered up the one deal at Maine and said it was a boiler that exploded, but it was uncovered off the ocean floor in 2012, and it was blown up by a torpedo. So anyways, that's my Did You Know. So did you know to everyone? Thank y'all for listening to us. God bless y'all. Go to Mallard Bay, mallardbay.com. Book your hunt, your outfitter get together with Mallard Bay. And remember, the First Family of Waterfowl Season 3 premieres on Thursday, July 18th at 7 p.m. Central Time, correct?
That's right.
We look forward to it. Thank y'all. God bless y'all. Have a great week. See us at Squad Fest.
Ooh.